I think I figured it out. There's something about the new Percy Jackson show that when I'm watching it, I just feel like something's off, like something isn't right. And there have been a lot of criticisms flying around. Many of them I don't agree with because I don't think they're appropriate criticisms of the show. I don't think we should be criticizing any of the actors, especially the child actors, for putting on performances that are absolutely phenomenal in the show, but they're not what we thought they should be. I also do think that we need to be forgiving of a lot of changes because a lot of these changes are actually good and they help the story in itself. I think it's really brilliant that we're getting a deeper look into each of the characters. We're getting a deeper look into Percy and his struggle with his mental health. We're getting a look into Annabeth and her struggle with her parental issues. And we're finally seeing more of Grover as a character and his past, which I thought was seriously lacking in the actual books. More than anything, with the most recent episode that came out, we are finally getting a look into Sally and Poseidon's relationship. And though that scene was so short with the two of them and they never made eye contact, you could so tell that these were two people who deeply cared about each other, but cared about Percy more. And so I think that these changes and these aspects of the show are brilliantly done, but there's still something that's off with it. And Rick and the showrunners from the beginning have been saying that Rick is going to have a lot more involvement in the show than he did in the movies, which was basically none. And this is something that the fans have been vying for years because they desperately missed Rick's involvement, and they believe that that was a major reason why the movies failed and were so bad. And I do think the author's involvement is a very good thing, but I also think that that is where the issue lies with the show. Because when watching the show, it doesn't read as a TV adaptation of The Lightning Thief. It reads as though Rick is rewriting The Lightning Thief the way that he thinks it should be done now. Essentially, it feels like we're not watching a TV show, it feels like we're watching a novel. Because with novels, specifically novels aimed at middle schoolers in that age range, you can get away with a lot more telling rather than showing. Whereas TV shows have that visual component that novels don't. And so for any adaptation, you should be able to do a lot more showing rather than telling, even if it is aimed at children. And I think this is a big part of why the pacing has been so off in the TV show. Because I know logically, my brain is telling me logically that there are so many aspects and changes in the TV show that definitely improve the narrative. But there's a clear disjoint between the mediums because we are essentially watching a novel rather than watching a show adaptation of a novel. And I don't think these criticisms are particularly damning towards the show in a whole. I think that these are criticisms that can be easily improved on upon season 2. And I sincerely hope the show does continue on and gets renewed for another season because I do think it has a lot of potential. But I do think the creators and the showrunners and even the fans have to let go of the fact that this isn't going to be a beat-for-beat retelling of the books. And that as a whole, it shouldn't be a beat-for-beat retelling of the books. We're telling the story, we're not telling the page. And I do know that a lot of people have stopped watching the show because of personal opinions and what they thought they wanted to see on screen, and they just can't get past that. And that's completely okay because art is subjective and you can't like what everyone else likes. But I am still thoroughly enjoying the show because for me, the pros outweigh the cons. And the cons for me are more things that can be improved on with later development and later work. And a part of me is wondering that because the movies had such a lack of Rick's involvement and the fan base was so up in arms about that, that the TV showrunners thought that Rick had to be involved from the start to the finish. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing because a lot of authors have adapted their works into very successful adaptations. But I do think in this case it reads as though Rick was trying to rewrite The Lightning Thief as a novel rather than as a TV show. And that's why I think the pacing feels off and there's a lack of urgency in the fight scenes and why there seems to be way too much talking when there should be action. But I do think we should encourage people to keep watching because the show has so much heart and it can be so good. It's just its first season and it's just finding its legs. And this is hardly the first 30-minute show that had a wobbly first season. You look at Parks and Rec, you look at the US version of The Office, and both of those went on to become incredibly successful shows. But their first seasons were... And I would say that the first season of Percy Jackson is by far better than they were. But essentially that's my main criticism of the show. I feel like it's reading more like a book than a TV show, which it should be.